Hello and welcome to the Trust and Influence in B2B podcast. I'm your host, Joel Harrison. As the title of this podcast suggests, it has a very broad remit covering all angles relating to the evolving challenges associated with generating trust and influencing buyers in all aspects of business-to-business marketing and sales. These are perennially tough challenges, but they've taken on a new urgency and resonance in what's a really fast-changing landscape. Episodes are released weekly, generally speaking, when I get around to it, so please don't forget to subscribe and like or rate this episode or podcast generally. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most challenging questions in B2B marketing. How do you build genuine trust with C-suite executives who are bombarded with messages, famously skeptical of advertising, and have a limited time for anything that feels like marketing? Our guest, Izzie Rivers from Realm, has been cracking this code for their enterprise clients, engaging valuable members of this target executive audience and influencing enterprise pipeline. But here's what makes this conversation particularly valuable. The trust-building principles behind these successes can be applied by any B2B marketer, regardless of budget size or where they're operating from. We'll be exploring how to transform from product-focused messaging to passion point storytelling, how internal influencer content outperforms standard marketing by 500%, and how strategic consistency can build executive trust, even when you can't afford global reach. So 3 key lessons we're going to look to get you to take away today. The people-first advantage, why authentic employee and executive voices dramatically outperform traditional marketing content, and how the company can leverage internal talent as trust-building assets. Quality over quantity in channel selection, a framework for identifying and prioritizing the few channels where your executive audience actually trust the content rather than spreading thin across dozens of touch points, and the trust sequence strategy, how to build cumulative excellence through strategic content layering and consistent messaging, even with limited budgets and trust and touch points. So that's an awful lot there, but what I haven't done is welcome Izzy. Izzy, hello.
Hello.
Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you too.
So we've got a lot to get through there, no pressure at all.
No pressure. C-suites, one of my favourite topics.
One of your favourite topics. Okay, one thing to talk about a lot. And we're going to reference some work you've done throughout the conversation, because it's always good to bring practical examples where it's appropriate and where it's possible, because not all things can be shared with all people all the time, can they? But we'll bring alive some examples where we can. Great. Okay. Do you want to tell us a bit about who you are, Izzy? Tell us a bit about Realm, first of all. We haven't prepped for this, but you've been in B2B for many years, haven't you? And tell us about who you are and Realm, what they do.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in B2B media planning and buying for about 25 years now. Hard to believe, I know. But worked in some large agencies like the Dentsus and the WPPs of the world and Ogilvy, for example. And then founded my own agency in 2020 called Realm B2B. During the pandemic, always a fun thing to do. It seemed like a really good idea at the time, Joel, and it's panned out quite well, which is nice. And we've got, offices in the US and the UK, and we handle global media planning and buying and strategy and marketing, mark-on strategy for B2B companies, mostly tech, some FinServe, some manufacturing. It's fun.
Fantastic. And you've generally been quite a prominent figure around B2B. You've done some training and things like that in the past, haven't you?
Yeah. I've run a lot of training for people in-house, actually, in large organisations, as well as for networked organisations like B2B Marketing for yourself, some large finance companies, for example. So I think training the next generation is one of the more exciting things to do. And that's a bit about the conversation I'm so excited to talk about today, is people learn from what's worked for other people. So
absolutely. Okay, great. Well, let's dive into this topic then. So let's talk about a people-first advantage. Why? Tell us a bit about. Let's beg your pardon. Let's scratch that bit and we'll come back to that bit. So let's talk about. Let's dive into the conversation here. So, Izzy, reaching C-suite executives is notoriously difficult. They're bombarded with messages and famously consume little advertising, or at least they claim they consume very little advertising. Beyond the big budgets, what are the fundamental principles that you do use with your clients to build trust with an audience that is inherently skeptical of marketing?
Well, I mean, that's a really, really good question. I think there's a difference between crafting a C-suite persona and delivering effective marketing to that C-suite persona. And often when we speak to clients, the work stops at, we know C-suite are really important in this decision, we've crafted messaging that we think is of interest to them, and then the bit with how do we get it in front of them in an informed way that they actually notice it tends to fall off the table a little bit, and that's actually the hardest bit, because your previous point that they famously do not consume marketing in many different touch points. So I would say that's where we usually come into the conversation and say, hold on a minute, C-suites really don't act like any of the other audiences you can target in paid media. you really need to think this strategy through a bit more.
Okay. So deep analysis, really, understanding them, understanding what they do, where they go, who they are, that kind of thing, and perhaps questioning your assumptions.
Yes, and also just figuring out what, I mean, this is the difference between media channels and the overarching messaging architecture, right? Most channels are making an informed decision that this person is likely a member of your target audience because they've behaved in a particular way in the past, they've demonstrated kind of intent, they're reading a particular title, but it doesn't mean they are. So yes, you could do an amazing C-suite ad and you could put it in the Super Bowl, and the chances are everybody in your C-suite audience would see it. But how much wastage are you paying for there? And the other thing that people don't necessarily keep in mind is they're one of the most expensive audiences on the planet to target, if not the most expensive, because everybody wants to see C-suite executives. Do you think hundreds of thousands of companies are going to get in front of the CEO of the top FTSE 500 companies? No, they're not. So it's a phenomenally difficult audience to get in front of.
So let's talk about quality over quantity then. Let's talk about trying to find the right platforms, the right media outlets. Is that the right word? I'm not quite sure it is. Media brands.
Yeah, I don't know, would that work?
Outlet sounds very, very commercial. They're sure the journalists want to see themselves as brands rather than
Channels, platforms.
We know what we're talking about anyway. Brands. Let's go with brands. Let's go with brands. I mean, typically with your kind of campaigns, you tend to some of the ones we've been speaking about with this particular audience involved. You choose kind of a smaller number of very powerful publishing houses rather than spreading yourself across thinly across lots of different channels. Is that correct? And is that something then? But is that a sustainable route then? Do you have to have very large budgets from very global brands to do that? Does that kind of that strategy inherently preclude people who are perhaps at a lower budget level?
It doesn't. It's the thought behind the strategy. So, I mean, I'm sure you remember a case study that we did for one of our clients, HPE, won an award this year and last year actually for their C-suite campaign activity. And that's where we really identified 4 massive global brands for them to align with. So I think it was Forbes, Business Insider, BBC and Wall Street Journal. Because we know that C-suites consume a lot of content there and we get a lot of content visibility around those platforms. And that is expensive because it's a priority audience in a very large publisher, exactly as you're saying. So that's not achievable for everyone. Not everyone has about $2 to $5 million they can spend on a global program for sure. But the principle behind that is going somewhere in a long-term fashion where people are coming to read things and interact with things already. It's not pushing things out to an audience that's a proxy audience that probably isn't a C-suite in the first place and wasting your audience. So you have to go where that draw is, and you also have to go where that quality is so you can be associated with it. And that does have an element of scale to it. It's always going to have an expense because, again, the most expensive audience on the planet to get in front of, and everybody's trying to get in front of them. But you can do it in quite smart ways where you can be discoverable in places where they're more likely to be.
Okay, and I guess that lends itself towards partnership, doesn't it? And understanding what those particular organisations offer, and perhaps not taking the most easiest, quickest, or obvious thing that's going to be put on the table. It's about building that partnership and building that. Is it also about breadth of relationship as well, length of relationship, kind of tenure, both for the brand and for you as a media organisation, understanding what it is they can do and how best to work with them?
Yes, and the content that they're putting out there is incredibly important as well, of course, and I'm sure we'll come on to talking about that. But purely on the targeting side of things, I mean, I would encourage anyone, for example, who doesn't have large budgets to do deep publisher programs, to look at things like a very intelligent PMP within your programmatic, for example. Start running even ads you have, your digital ads on those websites that have that clout and in the right sections in a more cost-effective way. But that has to be an always-on, really considered program where you have agreements with these, network publishers in the first place. You can't just turn those on really quickly and expect them to have an impact in 1 quarter, for example.
Okay, all right. So let's talk a little bit more about kind of pathways towards executive trust. So you run diverse content approaches to C-suite executives across your clients? For example, product focused kind of AI type stuff, passion point focused things like F1 and other sports, and people first stuff, CEO interviews and employee stories. How did these different trust building strategies perform, and which approach offers the best ROI for smaller budgets? Is it a very simple? Is it possible to simplistically say, well, this one works better if you've got a smaller budget, or does it really depend on lots of different criteria?
Oh, it depends what you want to achieve. That sounds like a roundabout one. Firstly, I would like to say, for example, that I know that passion points with sports is incredibly important, but I've met loads of CEOs and CMOs that don't like the F1. Just put it out. I like it myself. So it's a patchwork thing. You're still placing bets when you go for passion points, which is quite interesting because we're all different. But yes, to your question, it starts with a really good brief. We have to really clearly define what we want these CEOs to do, or these CMOs or CIOs or whatever it is. And it is not immediately buy a product or buy a service. You just want to get in their mind share. You want to be there. You want, to be recognised so that when they're signing things off. And really then it's about activating the peer network underneath. If the budget isn't there to target C-suites effectively, I would advise don't target the C-suites. Strip them out. Because if you're finding a really cheap way of targeting C-suites, they're not C-suites. You're targeting a completely different audience. Much better strategically go after their buying team and give them enough information to manage up. And then just run one consistent thing where that they are. It reminds me of the old days. You remember like the bumper ads before the 10 o'clock news or whatever it is. Like do a really good sponsorship and then target that layer underneath and turn them into advocates for your business and actually manage it up. Do that if you don't have the budget for C-suites. And if you do, figure out what your brief is and what action you want them to take. And that will dictate whether you're doing a passion point around F1 or NFL or whatever it happens to be versus a passion point around AI in consumer life, for example.
A lot of pragmatism and realism here, having to perhaps say some things which might be unpalatable to clients, where you just you can't do what you're wanting to do. You haven't got them, or you could do it, but you won't get very far with it because you haven't got the money that's going to make an impact. Is that fair?
It is. Take demand generation for the C-suite, for example. In some ways, that could be useful. If you have a way of absorbing C-level contact information, IP addresses, ABM targeting, whatever it happens to be, into your own first-party data, then you can create effective segments or lookalike segments that will give you a more powerful audience in digital. But what you can't do really, and I've never seen be effective in 25 years, although some companies still say they can do it, is lead gen, where you get a phone number for a CEO and then that gets immediately flagged to a sales team and you've got a sales exec going, this person has scored as an immediate opportunity because they're a senior decision maker. I'm going to ring them straight away and try and flog them something. And it
doesn't happen.
Just an example. No, it doesn't happen. And there are better ways of doing it. But I do think it takes pragmatism, to be honest, because you can spend a lot of money targeting the wrong people.
Yeah. Okay. And and it's better to be to scrutinise that early rather than regret at your leisure. Okay. So we're going to talking about more. We teased earlier on that there's an example which you have, which from a case study of yours, where you've had employee and executive content that outperforms standard contents by up to 500%. That's enormous. What does it tell you about how executives build trust and how smaller companies leverage their own people as trust building assets? Tell us a bit more about that example.
You've probably done a lot of talking, I know you have, around influencer marketing and the trust around influencers and how important that is. We're seeing that in content, not just with C-level executives, but with marketing as a whole. So we've done some testing where we looked at the results against really good deep ads around passion points and also around technical explanation or AI, and compared that to longer form content where an influencer was present. So Antonio, for example, for HPE, giving some perspective on the future of technology, but also really intelligent product managers we've seen perform really well, technical experts in smaller companies that really understand the benefits that their products provide. And I think it's just speaking more to moving from that sales conversation and pasting your billboard out there and saying, buyers, we're great, and moving more to putting trust out there from people that people can, you know, when somebody knows what they're talking about, or if it's somebody that you respect. And especially with more high-powered audiences, that speaks volumes, because we've always seen in B2B marketing that peer networks work best. Networking at events, trusting, oh, you know, Dave, who is it that you used for your digital transformation? Because we're looking at doing the same thing and we want to put them on the RFP list. So I think in a way it's taking the spirit of that.
I mean, in a way, it's going back. Part of this is going back to the old modicum, which I think was Jay Bauer used to talk about kind of 10 years ago: stop selling, start helping. But it's a bit, but it's part of that. But it's beyond that as well. It's also start helping, but start kind of telling people, you know, providing a broader perspective. It's not just providing you practical guidance, here, go and do this. It's about kind of laying out actually the bigger issues and enlightening them around what's going on. So I think, I mean, and that just...
We can take that and look at the numbers. That's the thing I love about media. I mean, that's a statement, and it's almost like a B2B ethos or myth or whatever it is, but it's true. And that's where we're running, and we're comparing the performance on those, and we're getting 500% more engagement on ads and assets that include a respected influencer within the organisation than ones that don't.
And that is interesting, because I've got to say, I have looked at influencer marketing as an alternative strategy towards conventional means, such as media buying, for example. But you're saying the two things absolutely go hand in hand, and it's a one way of boosting it's a clear way of boosting the impact of more conventional, in speech marks, if you're listening rather than watching this, activity. So that's fascinating. You mentioned Antonio Neri. So he's a CEO of HP, is that right? Okay. And he was doing what was he doing? Peer-to-peer interviews, did you say?
Well, so yes, he was doing interactive content. So I feel like I'm switching gears a little bit here, because there's two elements of it. Number one is having these implements in, and the second one is almost like a choose your own story or a more dynamic article. So these were sort of like, think about interview articles with trusted publications like the Wall Street Journal, like Forbes, etc. And then having those perspectives clearly brought to life in a way that you can use across multiple channels. You know, that might be a bit of video, it might be a bit of text, it might be dynamic image on the page, for example. So that helps as well to build up the engagement. But for the 500%, we were comparing like for like.
Okay, but what you just started to talk about there is you know, it's not just a one and done kind of here's an interview, off you go, that's it. You've actually kind of creatively tried to redeploy those assets and that medium in very different ways to make it relevant and to maximise the impact.
You have to empower them to look as quality as you want them to be received, I suppose. And I mean, I'm not having a go at blogs. We've all used blogs, although how long SEO is going to be around, I don't know. Whole other conversation. You need to have that sort of pride in the article. I mean, again, I'll harken back to the olden days. It's the DPS in the Sunday Times with the interview, and you can tell your friends and family, look at me, I've made it to, you know, the business section or the financial section or whatever it is. It has to be an element of that, you know. A company blog where there's a couple of quotes just doesn't do it in the same way.
So do you think that you'd recommend? I'm going to put words in your mouth here. So tell me if you agree with these words or not. All right. So it sounds like your you know, your media buyers and your creative agencies should be, as a matter of course, within their campaign planning, looking for these individuals within the organisations who can become the vehicles for these campaigns. I guess not necessarily your words, but they're obviously a key vehicle, and you need to understand whether they're relevant in the situation that you're in.
Yeah, and it's just that, again, maybe I'm just a practical pragmatist. I don't know, but I'm a C-level, and I'm really interested in AI. That's something that I'm doing a lot with at the moment. I'll watch an interview with Sam Altman, but I'm not reading all the bump from OpenAI. There's not enough time. And I'd rather see what the direction is and what they believe in, as much as you can say that with the AI leaders at the moment. I'd rather see that than you know, read the long tail information. And I think that's just one illustration, isn't it?
Let's talk about the dynamics between earned media and paid trust. I mean, what about face-to-face moments? How different budget ranges create trust amplifying experiences? Have you got any idea about, are there any principles that you're trying to work to, and that perhaps other marketers can apply in terms of kind of creating those FaceTime activities?
Yeah, FaceTime's the holy grail with the C-suite. If you can get time in front of them, the chances are that a sale's going to happen because they really will remember who you are. And we did some great work out with that HP case study with things like the Wall Street Journal House and with some CIO network activity, for example. And that is nice because you can track that straight to sales because you get the senior salespeople in the room, and that builds that water cooler moment where people say, hey, did you know this program just generated in X, Y, Z? And it's also important because if the C-level is involved in that conversation early on, we know that the deal size will be a lot larger, typically, because it's top down. It's not a test in one part of the organisation that then needs to expand, for example. So yes, aligning with networks is really important, and that does mean doing the heavy lifting with events and, getting the right people in a room and having a good story to tell. But outside of that, if that's not within budget or within the timescales, look for publishers and providers that have networks of subscribers, and people that really belong to that brand and follow it, not resellers of information and data and contacts, because that's where things start to get really blurry.
So again, there's no one size fits all. It's about a creative understanding of the situation that you're in, the brand you're working with, the media environment surrounding that, potentially the proclivities of the individual as well. That presumably plays into it?
Yes, it does. And, social media is a really powerful tool here. And again, if we're talking specific to the C-suite, much more in the video and news and information side of things. And also perhaps, some of the more interesting TikToks for awareness. But it's hard to get that sort of level of approval with the current market that we have at the moment because we don't get the initial results. I think there's still very much with the way that digital media has come up, there's this expectations within marketing departments that you'll be able to track that immediately all the way through to a sale. When it is still display, you wouldn't have done that if it was TV in the old days before programmatic. You wouldn't have done it with print. You would have just known that it would have been in front of them, and that's enough.
But is that from the marketing department, or is that going all the way back to the CFO and probably the CEO as well, because they're the ones who are demanding to know what's marketing done for this firm lately? Why haven't you delivered X million pounds of revenue that lands tomorrow from that thing you spent yesterday?
Then you're in pipeline and pipeline impact, aren't you? That's what they care about. Whereas I think it is the marketer that's saying, I've just run X amount of thousands on social media to this senior audience and I've got clicks but nothing else. And you're like, well, yes, that's usually how it performs.
It feels like we're perennially having to play wake up to realities here.
I wish it did. It would be fantastic. But if anybody had cracked that by now, they would be, a multi-billionaire. And marketing would be easier.
It would. We don't want things to be easy, though, do we? We don't. Who wants an easy life, right? That's
so why we're in B2B. We'd have been in consumer if that was the case.
Exactly. Okay, let's keep moving on and let's talk about frequency. So, some of your analytics that we talked about shows executives need 9+ exposures to move the needle on visibility. For marketers who can't afford 15 touch points per month, how do you sequence fewer, higher impact interactions to build that cumulative trust?
Oh, again, this is a really, really hard question. It's like if you can't get the reach and the frequency to a senior audience, like a C-level segment, don't do it. Would be my answer to that, as cold as it is. I would say look at the staff you have, look at the hires you have, look at sales, look at the black books, look at doing much better remarketing. I was just asked on another call this morning, like if you could ask a B2B marketer what they should tattoo on their arm for FY 27 or 2026 planning, what should it be? And I will say, prioritize consolidating your audiences. Please just do it. I know product campaigns are important and solution campaigns are important, but if your audiences are not in the same place, then even outside of cannibalization, you're not leveraging them effectively and you are not getting that level of frequency and you are completely ignoring the power that retargeting in your CDP segments will provide you.
Izzy, I think one thing's clear from the answer. You should never own a tattoo parlour, right? Because that's never going to fly, is it? Going on people's arms. So,
I don't make good tattoo choices, Joel, on the whole, so...
that's a definitely different podcast, but maybe this is a question for LinkedIn. What should B2B marketers tattoo on their arm for 2026? Let's think on that and come back to it. Okay, all right. Well, there's a lot. I like the honesty here. There's lots of if you can't do this, then don't do that, and a lot of honesty and you want the truth, you can't handle the truth, kind of thing. So let's talk about measuring trust on any budget. I mean, one of the case studies again we talked about achieving you've achieved a fantastic pipeline influence for your clients, 92% in a particular case study. I think you entered the awards. How do smaller companies track trust building? I mean, how would you recommend people build track trust building? Is it possible to track? It's kind of a nebulous thing. You can track touch points, can't you? But you can't necessarily track. Can you track trust?
So, I mean, we've over my tenure in B2B marketing, quarter of a century, whatever they say, we've looked at this a lot. I've looked with companies at PR tracking and what kind of articles people are leading. So maybe lean in, social listening, what kind of sentiment are people expressing or seeing as they go around through social media. Brand to demand studies, remember the old Kantar studies, or people picking up the phone and asking what they think. Adding it to lead gen calls at the end. Thank you. What was your experience with this sales experience, and how likely are you to recommend us in the future? I don't think that there is a good, solid one trust barometer, but if anybody listening to this knows of one, please tell me. I'm always open to meeting a new company. I think that trust comes out in the numbers, and CEOs and CFOs, to your earlier point, are going to care about how big are the deal sizes. Do they trust us enough to take a big gamble for a first-time buyer? And then what is the repeat business?
I think I completely agree with you. I don't think you can measure trust directly. I think trust is implicitly, trust is a facet of a deal when it being won, right? And trust is implicitly there. If you haven't established trust, then you haven't signed the deal. So it's not something you can separate out from that. That's my take on it.
Yeah, and we always say with us, we know that we're trusted as a company when a client of ours moves somewhere else and then they're picking up the phone and saying, hi, we'd like to come over. That's what it is. Referrals, continued platform usage. I know that's a boring one and SaaS is having a tough time at the moment, but are they actually using the thing they bought? That's always a good one.
It's a pretty critical thing. So we touched on kind of passion points, and every industry has passion points. Every individual has passion points. How do you identify and authentically connect with executive interests without a major sponsorship deals? That's quite as you said, saying it's quite subjective, isn't it? Right? Not all CFOs like rugby, for example.
You're incredibly important and a man about town. Now you're an influencer, Joel. What are your passion points? Because
oh, go on. Sorry.
No, go on. I bet ours are wildly different.
I mean, mine are things like architecture and and kind of media and things like that. And other kind of history and kind of geeky things like that. I mean, I do like a bit of football. The mind boggles why everyone spends as much as they do on F1, but that's just my view. So yeah, everyone's got a different thing they're interested in, right?
Yeah, I mean, mine's heavy metal and rock music. If there's any C-level advertising that's targeting, I don't know, Metallica or something like that, I'll probably see it, but I won't see anything around sport. So I don't know. On passion points, I know they're important because the more emotive or a mood that somebody's in when they see the advertising or what kind of a level it has, then you're more likely to have a bond to it and more of a long-standing relationship. Like I have a love of Jägermeister because it has been at all those rock gigs I've been at, and it's a completely irrational love. It's not exactly a smooth martini at the end of the day, is it? But
it's definitely not that. I know what to get you for Christmas, then, Izzy. That's all I can say. It is, yeah. It's fascinating the things which resonate in different ways. I guess it crosses into that B2B versus B2C. It's like, well, we are all human beings. We are all operating. We bring our human sides to work. We don't often make it visible for obvious reasons. So there again, there's no simple answer to this one. I do have a suspicion that sometimes it's quite subjective on the part of someone. The person signing the checks generally invests in something which they quite like, and that isn't always the most objective process to go through. I know that's heresy to say that, but often I can't imagine someone who can't stand F1 is going to invest in F1 or similar to rugby or football or any of those things. Is that am I being ruthlessly cynical there?
I think it's about being visible. I think that's the challenge when it's a C-level executive, is you have to be seen in the first place. And if lots and lots of people are seeing these powerful, passionate waterhole moments, at least your audience are probably seeing it too. And they're feeling pretty darn good when they're doing it. So I think there's a lot to be said for passion points. But I mean, at the end of the day as well, there is that logical side that has to come in. I would encourage anybody to do good deals with their partners or their clients to be able to get great case studies. I mean, use cases have been part of the conversation since the year dot, of course, but that would convince me if somebody in my industry had their business turned around by implementing a new piece of technology, for example.
I mean, my general feeling is that advocacy is treated as an afterthought. It's such a powerful aspect of trust, and there are things like NPS, but they are limited at best, and there are case studies which people use as a kind of like a workman-like addendum, but they don't do much to land. There's not many mechanisms to deliver that, although there haven't been. That's something I'm going to return to, and there's companies like Partner who are very, very interesting who are emerging in that area. So, okay, but let's move on from that. So, I mean, one of the things which is very, very powerful in terms of building that trust is content marketing also, but content that doesn't look like marketing. Where something that educates and inspires rather than pitches. I mean, you're nodding there, so I'm guessing you, as a baseline, you agree with me that that's powerful. How do you go about creating that? Is that something which people should consider as it should be a fundamental part of a campaign, particularly a media campaign?
I think it's that balance between really understanding what your audience wants and aligning to answering for their needs, but at the same time being true to who you are as a company. And it's that authenticity that builds trust and provides better performing content. And just, slight left turn in the conversation, but you see that with companies that have challenges and issues as well. Like you remember the CrowdStrike situation, we're living in a world right now where cybersecurity companies will be dealing with challenges to their technology because of AI, and finance companies will be having challenges with keeping services running in certain bits and pieces. So how those are handled, as well as how marketing is done, because that comes through our marketing and advertising, of course, I think is absolutely vital. So it's about presenting yourself to the world, but also just being really, honest, I suppose, and at least true to what you do, and not, it's that overselling that people can sense.
I can't help feeling that in this area, educating can be educating, inspiring. Just kind of critiquing the language, my own language here. Educating and inspiring. And educating can be a bit worthy, can't it? Inspiring is a very broad church, and it can. And there's that element of there's what people they don't know what they don't know, and they don't know what they necessarily need to know. So finding that sweet spot of something which is related to business, to one degree or another, and yet is something which catches their attention. That's such a big place to play in, right? And that's can be quite daunting. And I think we did some research about the awards entries last year, and there were some categories, there's some entries which were trying to actually kind of address if not societal issues. There was one around sexism in a particular category, so stuff like that. So it's about creating. So this isn't necessarily, it is marketing content, but it's not necessarily addressing the head-on issues that people might think that are important. They're trying to take a tangential route and be inspirational in a different way, and that feels quite enlightened in a B2C capacity. I don't think B2B capacity. I don't think we see quite enough of that.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? And it comes. I've had multiple conversations with clients and network about, because we're entering planning season, so we're heading into what are people going to do next year if they're on calendar, or even if they're on April. And 6 of the companies that I've spoken to in the last 2 weeks, big companies, have given us the objective of being the leader in AI in the next year or two. So, who's going to win? I don't know. Everybody wants to be a leader in AI. But the thing I find most interesting in that is the comment about being a leader. Because I think when the CFO or the CEO are saying it, they mean in terms of revenue, right? We want to be making the most money off AI. We want to be succeeding in AI. We want it to be a transformative part of our business. We want to be an AI company. But even if you look at baseline psychology, being a leader is very different to being a manager, if you're reading those old things. And being a leader does mean inspiring people to follow you, taking an advanced lead in different things. So if I'm saying if you want to lead in a category, it's not enough to just drive sales. You really have to convince people that you're a leader for them to follow you, and the revenue will come.
That's a brilliant example. And you actually have to have the chops to be able to demonstrably, credibly claim that you are a leader, rather than just say the same old stuff which a lot of people are saying. And Yeah, a lot of it gets kind of lost. There's just a lot of AI wash, I think, at the moment.
And you can be, by the way, you can be a leader and do that in a company of any size. I firmly believe that. And especially with things like AI, the disruptors are going to come in as startups or spin-offs from the larger enterprises. You don't have to be the largest in your category to be a leader. I think if you demonstrate those tenets, you just make it faster. Like Salesforce, who blazed past the last, 20 years or whatever it is, did well at that.
Maybe you and I should have a conversation in a year's time about how that handful of clients are all doing in terms of their leader status. But
yes,
probably off the record, I suspect.
There's some quadrants somewhere that we can use for analysis.
Well, there should be. I mean, I was looking at doing some AI analysis of our awards entries, and it was the amount of times that AI came into the messaging was just it was a lot. Put it that way. So, Izzy, it's been a fantastic conversation as always with you. I always enjoy talking to you. I've got a closing question for you, which is, looking ahead as media continues to fragment and budgets face more scrutiny, what's your advice to B2B marketers who want to build authentic executive influence but need to prove ROI on every single dollar spent?
Tough question. I mean, that's really hard to do, isn't it? I think that there's an awful lot of time that's spent in analytics departments and by clients trying to granularly go over pipeline attribution and how media's performed and what direct link that has to an outcome. And sometimes, honestly, I think that time would be better spent actually driving outcomes than spending money analysing. And analytics is important, by the way. I'm not saying it isn't. But ultimately, when those things come down from the board, the exec board or the board, it's because they want to increase the sales. And that's where you have to look, what are the macro swings, what products are performing better, and just make those top strategic decisions, and then look and see what impact that's having on the business that's coming in, which can mean quick pivots. And I think we just need to we should all just take a second and think, we're living in a really tough time for all marketing, not just B2B. It's the toughest I've known it in 25 years. And I'm one of those early millennials that's been through how many recessions now, Joel? 3? How many? I've lost track.
A lot.
Yeah, so it is tough. And some of these questions are really hard to answer. And, keep going. I'd say just hang in there. Keep doing the best that can be done. And see how those sales come in. But this whole more with less mentality that we're living in is biting. But I don't want to leave on a negative note because it's been a fantastic conversation. So I say keep measuring, keep trying, keep throwing things at the wall and look at the numbers. And usually there's something strategic in there that can make a difference.
But I also thought your point earlier on, it is a hard question, and I thank you for making just a great fist of answering it. I think your point earlier on about investing time in the data up front as well is always important. That always gets forgotten. It was a problem 25 years ago before we launched B2B Marketing, and it's still a problem now. There's never enough time spent on that. So that will obviously
and it's an old trope, but don't just spend your whole time removing the things that aren't working. Spend time doubling down on the things that are working.
Absolutely. Izzy, thanks so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I always do. You've got fascinating perspective and so much insight. So thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and if you have, please feel free to reach out to Izzy. But more importantly, well, not more importantly, but as importantly, remember to like this episode and comment on the podcast generally, and subscribe as well, because we'd love to get your comments and thoughts, and more importantly, we'd love to have you a subscriber so you can enjoy more of this content going forward. Thanks for Izzy again for today. Thanks for listening, and I hope you can join us again very, very soon. Goodbye.